our this distinguished guest, Jim Ferguson, as well as Randy Taylor.
There's some crazy stuff going on in the UK right now, and it's not going to stay in the UK. It's coming to the United States. It's coming to Canada. It's coming to Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and practically every other country that has been infiltrated by globalists in our parliaments and our respective governments. We're seeing journalists being arrested just for reporting the news. And it's not that they're saying anything inflammatory, they're just reporting on what they're seeing, and they're reporting it mainly on Twitter, or X as it's now known as, because the other platforms are so heavily censored. But I appreciate what you say. You know, at the end of the day, we have to stand up and we have to fight for what's right. Because the globalists want to instill fear into the independent media. They want to control the narrative. And of course, at the last Davos meeting, their firm priority wasn't on curing world hunger or stopping world war or finding cures for cancer or anything noble. No, it was on disinformation and misinformation. In other words, if you're saying anything that doesn't fit with their narrative, then you are a major threat. And what we've witnessed here in the United Kingdom over the course of the last few weeks has been quite incredible in terms of the crackdown on free speech. And, you know, we have the Magna Carta. We have enshrined in our laws the ability to air your opinion, to speak freely. And the globalists and those in power in the UK are trying to take that away from the people. And, you know, they are really upsetting millions of Brits by telling them that they're far right or they're racists or they're obnoxious, when in actual fact, they're just ordinary people like us, deeply concerned at the massive levels of illegal immigration. We don't have an issue with normal migration that's approved and managed and properly controlled, but the vast majority of people in this country are becoming increasingly alarmed because it's out of control. And these young men that are coming in, and they're not women, they're not children, they're not fleeing as asylum seekers from war-torn countries, because nobody would have an issue with that. But they're all young men, aged between 19 and 30 predominantly, and they're being housed now in military bases and indeed in hotels the length and breadth of the country. And it's happening in Ireland as well, and in many other nations. And what we're seeing is this massive influx coming in. And there is some very real concerns that in actual fact, they may be here in our respective countries for another purpose. It's been spoken about increasingly that because they're predominantly young fighting age men, that they might be given special powers and enlisted by the globalist government to exert control over the indigenous populations. And indeed, Colonel McGregor made a very similar comment to this when he was being interviewed on GB News just within the last couple of days, and I've got that up on my channel as well. Before that, I had other guests on who said that they've got military contacts and that this whole influx of illegal migrants is being done by design. It is being done on purpose. The United States southern border is wide open. The United States is at serious risk. And we're talking, you know, between 30 and 40 million illegal migrants coming in there. You guys have got a huge problem. We've got a huge problem. And what I'm trying to do in Freedom Train International as its founder is to wake people up and say, look, you are not isolated in America. You're not isolated in Canada. You're not alone in France, Germany, Holland, Australia, or New Zealand. We are all facing exactly the same problems because your governments have been infiltrated by globalists as well. And we're bringing people together. We're uniting patriots all around the world with multiple thousands of members now. And we are now the most quickly growing freedom movement in the world. And we only really launched just a few short months ago. And I pay credit to people like yourselves who've supported us, who have supported the freedom movement. And indeed, it looks like I'll be heading back to the United States fairly soon, and indeed Canada. And I'm definitely going to come and pay my respects to you guys if I actually get there, because we are all facing the same problem. And we've got to get together and we've got to fight this collectively as one.
Little kids being stabbed to death on the street. Jim, you got to tell us about what happened at that Shania Twain thing.
Yeah, I mean, three little girls were brutally murdered at a dance studio, and it was actually a Taylor Swift dance studio. And I don't care what religion somebody is. You do that to little children, then you are just pure evil.
Thank you.
That there are, and I have had Muslim guests onto the channel who are horrified at what's being done in the name of Islam. But, you know, there is a radical side to Islam. We all know it. And these moderates are really worried about what's going to come, because they don't like being lumped together with that type of behavior. And certainly the young migrant men that are coming in are the ones who are spreading the lawlessness, the crime, the rapes, the assaults on women and children. It's not really the indigenous Muslims who've integrated into the UK that are causing the issues. And they are increasingly speaking out. But there is a very serious threat by the radicals within Islam to push their ideology into communities. And there are now areas where they are predominantly Muslim that are seeing Sharia patrols being brought into the streets. But what's really caused this huge upset within the British population isn't so much that, although that's bad enough. It's that Keir Starmer has taken a very prejudiced view against the concerns of working class Brits here in England. And here in London right now, if you really want to know what's going on, you ask a taxi driver, that, you know, the London cabbies, you hop into a taxi. I always like to pretend I'm from the London East End. Of course, that doesn't work too well with my Scottish accent, but, you know, they have a good laugh. And when you get the sort of the rapport with them, they'll tell you what's really going on. And what the general feeling is that there is a two-tier policing system in place now in the UK, and also a two-tier justice system. And these are ordinary people. Some of them are grandmothers who have been arrested, put into police cells, handcuffed, charged. And some of these people, I had another interview that was posted on my Twitter feed just about maybe 4 or 5 days ago. This elderly woman, she was horrified. She'd never been in a police station in her life. And she was bullied, intimidated, and terrified out of her mind. And this is what's happening here in the United Kingdom, where we started the democracy, the mother of all parliaments, and look what it has descended into, gentlemen. It is absolutely horrific. And it's coming to every single country, because ultimately, the reason this is all happening, and the reason that mass illegal immigration is happening in all our respective countries, is to sow dissent, to weaken, to destabilize, because the globalists want a one world government that they control. And any strong nationalistic country with people that pay tribute to their flag, that are proud of their national anthem, that's a problem for them, because they will resist a new world order, one world government. So what they're doing is they're quite deliberately destabilizing it. They're destabilizing Canada under Trudeau, now the UK under Starmer in particular, although it was happening under Sunak with the fake conservatives as well. And it's happening under Joe Biden, and it will happen under Kamala Harris if she does become the president of the United States, God forbid. But it's happening in all of our nations, and it's really, really worrying. One of the other things that started to happen in the UK is that they're now telling usually older people, maybe people that have worked hard all their lives, they've been married for a long time, they've invested, and they've upgraded their properties, you know, through the process. And now maybe a widow who's living in a house that's maybe got 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms, she's getting a knock on the door from the authorities saying, you don't need a house this size. You're going to have to move into a different place because we need your house for illegal migrants and asylum seekers. I kid you not. That particular article was up on GB News. When this gets reposted, I'll probably put a link up to it, guys, you know, just so people can actually see that actually did happen and is happening. Yeah. But the other thing that is very concerning is if they actually do provide powers to illegal migrants, these young migrant men, with uniforms, and they're effectively becoming a de facto paramilitary force that's being used to control the indigenous populations of the United States, the UK, and other nations, then they have no empathy to our respective countries or the people there. what the globalists will want to do is they will use, for example, in Canada, if they had a particular province that they wanted some heavy-handed policing, they didn't use police from that province. They took them in from far away because those police officers would have no empathy with those local people, because police officers that live within the community, their children go to the schools, their wives maybe work there, and they've got a bit of empathy with the local populations. So these illegal migrants, if they are given special police-like powers and uniforms, they'll have no empathy with American people or with the United Kingdom people. They will happily enforce whatever draconian rules, whatever lockdowns they decide to implement. And we could be seeing that happening. There's a couple of threats on the horizon that we all need to be aware of. First of all, they've been talking up H5N1, bird flu, avian influenza for quite some time, since the poultry in Texas were detected spreading the H5N1 virus to beef cattle. Now they're talking about this at the World Health Organization. Dr. Tedros, who's not a medical doctor and who is the mouthpiece of Bill Gates, who now funds the World Health Organization more than anybody else, is now starting to ramp up that narrative. We've seen other headlines where the H5N1's been seen in the milk supplies and in eggs. I've got contacts in Tasmania, Australia, that say that the egg prices are going through the roof and they're becoming short in supply. So we are seeing perhaps a multifaceted attack on our nations through potential further lockdowns, but also potential war. And we've seen further escalations in Ukraine, with the invasion pushing into the Kursk region of Russia. And they are encouraging different countries to consider conscription, or drafts, I think you call it in the United States, where young men, 18 years old, are being told, you need to go into military service. And the previous Prime Minister, Sunak, and indeed Starmer, has also said the males or the people that are 18 that refuse to do that, they'll have their driving licenses confiscated, they'll have their bank accounts shut down, and they might face arrest if they refuse. And quite honestly, it's gone down like a lead balloon here in the UK because we don't want to see a war. It's not that I'm a pacifist. I would fight if I had to, but I don't think we've any business in Ukraine. There was massive provocations that went on there in the Donetsk and the Luhansk regions, even prior to Russia invading there. So we're seeing this ramping up. We might be facing famine. We might be facing food supply shortages. I've been all over Europe in the last 2 months. I've been to the Netherlands 3 times, Geneva, Switzerland, Denmark. Of course, I've been to Ireland. And I'm looking to head to France, Germany, and probably Sweden and Norway within the next few weeks. So things are ramping up. And our activity within Freedom Train International is connecting other freedom movements to us as well. So there's a lot of activity taking place there. And one of the things that we're building is a secure network so we can keep communications going. Because you talked about, Doug talked about Elon Musk, and he showed the clip about Mark Rowley talking about threatening Americans or anybody else with arrest and expatriation back to the UK to face justice, is by their way of it, right? Well, I've got multiple tens of thousands, probably more than that. I've got a big audience in the United States and in Canada. And, you know, the reaction has been off the charts. The people are saying, just try it, just try that. And it's game on, And quite rightly so. How dare the head of the London Metropolitan Police threaten an American citizen with arrest because they simply post something that's happening here in the United Kingdom? It's just a crazy, crazy situation here. But there's a lot of potential threats coming, guys. And of course, you've got people in the EU trying to close it down. Thierry Britain is a huge critic of Elon Musk. They're desperate to stop X, and they were desperate to stop this interview from taking place. So, how dare they? Doug, you're absolutely right. How dare your own government in the United States allow a foreign government, although we're allied, but they're all globalists, you see. That's the thing. They're all working behind the scenes with each other. But how dare they? That's just off the charts. If you're an American citizen, you are now classed as a second-class citizen as far as illegal migrants are concerned. They are now the top first-class people that the governments are recognizing. Same in the UK, Randy. And that is starting to happen more and more. There is now talk in Ireland as well that they are running out of these hotels to house them. and they're now looking at private accommodation. Of course, that will put rental prices up. It will put all sorts of issues there on the table. But we're already seeing pressure as far as education, school places, healthcare, and of course, housing, and the lawlessness that's spreading as well. The police are finding it hard to cope. But there's also evidence emerging, guys, that police officers are saying, because Keir Starmer and the senior police officer said there isn't a two-tier policing system, but that's not the case, because there are now police officers standing up and saying, listen, we've been told to go in heavy against the Brits on one side, and it's like hands off on the other side. And I've actually seen reports where people the police officers were talking about some of these radicalized Muslims would go walking past riot police, tapping machetes and planks of wood on their shields, knowing that the police were going to do nothing. Arriving with UN handlers, United Nations handlers, there seems to be a very, very organized and orchestrated move by the United Nations to take these people in. And of course, they get rid of all their documentation, they rip up their passports, they arrive effectively with no documentation. And of course, it's impossible to verify and vet who these people are. They could be terrorists, they could be anything, to be honest with you. They could be axe-wielding mass murderers. We don't know. I think some of them probably are. But yes, we are seeing this. We are seeing this more and more, and they're being given all sorts of benefits: priority healthcare, priority housing. Veterans, military veterans, are left homeless on the streets of the UK. Here in London, I've seen increasing amounts of military veterans who've just been basically abandoned. I don't know why anybody in the military would support this globalist government, because quite frankly, they don't care one bit about those in military service. And I'm sure it's the same in the United States as well. So yes, we're seeing a lot of very, very prejudiced things happening. But if you're an illegal migrant here illegally, everything's handed to you on a plate.
If I can ask one question, Randy, and to Jim. Now, it was reported, it's been reported, obviously, 11 million, some say 8 to 9 million, 11 million kind of, whatever, invaders coming in. I believe the number is more like 20 during this regime here in the U.S. Jim, can you tell us how many invaders the UK has allowed in, numbers-wise, or even by percentage of population?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me give you Ireland first of all, because I've been doing a lot of work in Ireland, and I've had a lot of contact with Irish patriots, and I can tell you, to sort of give you a bit of an easy to understand figure. The Irish indigenous population is 3 million. They're not a big population. The Irish are a small population, 3 million people, and within the last 4 to 5 years, that population has increased to 5 million. 2 million of that is largely illegal migrants, military-age men. Now, this is something that's worth taking close note of, because if you take into consideration and you take away from the indigenous Irish, the females, the elderly people, and the children, you are left with a much smaller proportion of fighting-age Irish patriots. But if you take into account that 2 million surplus of illegal migrants that have come in, you've got a tipping point where the illegal migrants probably substantially outnumber the young Irish men. Now, in the UK, it's very difficult. We have a population of about 67 million, at least from the last census data. I suspect that is much, much more increased, and once again, will have been largely due to illegal migrants. Look, there's not a hotel hardly in the country that you can go and book into. They've been so filled to capacity with illegal migrants that people are finding it hard to book honeymoons, for weddings, or just general holidays. And of course, once again, the illegal migrants, they are getting the priority. It's the same in the Netherlands. I was amazed. I did a lot of reports from the Netherlands. There is entire industrial areas with newish buildings, maybe 4, 5, 6 years old, that have been knocked down to build housing for illegal migrants. The amount of money that's been thrown at this. And the fact is, they're illegal. Why would any government be allowing illegal activity and sponsoring it to such an extent? There has to be another reason. And I think that's going to become apparent if and when there is another lockdown or if there is an armed escalation against Russia, where our forces, for example, in the United Kingdom, our soldiers are sent abroad to fight in Ukraine against the Russians, they're going to need somebody to maintain order here in the UK. And they know the population is getting really upset with what's going on. Well, they've got a resident sitting army of illegal migrants. If they legitimize them, if they give them powers and uniforms, well, they've got the control of the population there. And I believe it might just be the same modus operandi in the United States as well, and indeed every other country where this is happening. Be to remove UK British forces off to a foreign theatre of war. What they would do is they would either confiscate or, they'd probably confiscate or take away their communication devices for security reasons. And then they wouldn't hear about what was going on. They wouldn't hear about their loved ones being attacked or what was going on back in the homeland, I think there's a very real possibility of that happening. And one of the things that we are trying to do, and we've actually had a huge amount of success, is getting people to start thinking in a different way about all of this. Freedom Train International is encouraging people to look at alternative ways of food supply, linking up with local farmers, growing your own food, your own vegetables. It's not that hard to do. I've written 3 books within the last 14 to 15 months. They've not been published because I wanted to get the material put together. I spent a huge amount of time pulling all this information together, and it's now actually up on the Freedom Train International website. And it's to do with what you need to do right now. So from the early, intermediate, you've never thought about doing any of these types of things, how to prepare, what kind of food do you need? What kind of supplies do you need? What kind of medical things do you need? What about water? Are you near a water supply? How do you clean that water? Filtration systems, all of that is in those books. And we're giving guides to people. The other thing that we're really looking to do, I was on an Australian international conference a few nights ago. It hasn't been published yet, but I've had the link sent to me. And what I want to do is I want to hold and host an international conference. And I would love you guys to be involved in that. We're probably going to link up with Stu Peters. We're going to link up with other guys in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and we're going to get some really good guests on, maybe like yourself, Randy and Doug as well. And we'll get that live streamed out. In fact, the last time I did this, I did it with Wayne Peters of What's Up Canada. He's a great guy. He's a great, real friend to the channel, and just a wonderful guy all in. And of course, I was a panel of 6. I was one of the panels, and there was hundreds of thousands of people tuned in to that particular couple, or I think it was 2 or 3 different episodes that we did on each occasion. So we need to start to ramp up our activities. We need to start saying to people, look, you don't have to get digital ID. You don't have to go down the route of central bank digital currencies. You don't want to be in a 15-minute smart city. But it's all very well to tell people these things. What we're doing in Freedom Train International is we're showing you how to do it. And we're telling people there is another way. And when you link up with patriots and those that love their countries and their families and their communities all around the world, the amount of intelligence and resources that you can tap into is astronomical. If you ask a question, you will get an answer. We've got to fight back peacefully and smartly. We just don't need to comply with what they're trying to do. And I think Freedom Train International is giving people that knowledge and that ability to ask questions and learn from the real experts. But we want the United States to be there as well. I modeled Freedom Train after the Tea Party movement, although we're not really political. We are in a sense. But we are about humanity first. We're fighting for humanity against the globalists because the globalists have declared war on humanity. There's no doubt about it in my mind. We want to be at the tactical and the operational levels as well. What I mean by that is getting regions or provinces, as you call them in Canada, or states within the United States, having that Freedom Train movement within each of those states. We want them in the provinces in Alberta and British Columbia and Toronto and all these different states. We want people to then look at localized hubs where the farmers and the car mechanics and the nurses and the doctors and the solicitors that are forming those communities, and indeed the military veterans, start to unite and create localized hubs, support networks, within those areas. So Freedom Train International is an international organization, but we are building regional, state, province, and localized hubs within all of that as well.
Please follow him on Twitter or X at Jim Ferguson UK. Join Freedom Train International.